Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is kind of an unusual subject matter in terms of the individual that I'm going to be just briefly talking about. And her name is Nancy Spungen. If you don't know that particular name, maybe you know it if I said Sid and Nancy. Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols and his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen. A punk version of Romeo and Juliet. And the reason that I'm doing this, I somehow saw her name or something came up with her recently, and I said, I really want to see what her chart looks like. Years ago, I believe it was in the 80s, Nancy's mother was on a talk show, and I think that was when she was promoting her book. It was an autobiography or an account of her life with her daughter and how her daughter was a very difficult child to raise. And I read the book then, and I read it at least one other time. And it's really worth reading, even if you don't care about anything to do with the Sex Pistols, punk rock, anything. It's just such a wrenching book because what this woman went through was hell, just absolute hell. So, usually if a child is very rebellious or just difficult, you might be tempted to blame the parents, and maybe in many cases that would be accurate, that the parents were abusive or not understanding of the child, and that made the child act out. But in this case, I honestly believe the mother's, experiences, and think that she was just dealing with a child that was beyond the pale in terms of how she acted, and I think her mother believed that she couldn't help it because she was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teenager. I think that this goes well beyond schizophrenia, though. She was able to function to some degree, although she was like in a therapeutic school at some point when she was older. I don't remember all the details because I haven't read that book in a long time, but she from the time she was very young, she was screaming. I think from when she was a baby, just really shrieking and screaming, whatever you want to call it. And it was like she was in constant pain, whether it was emotional pain, physical pain, a combination thereof. So I just think that it might be an interesting look at why would somebody come to this lifetime to suffer so much, and what is the point? Well, I don't know if the chart can tell me what the point is, but just aspects of that. And the other thing to note is that she left school and she went to London or whatever. She went to England that's where she met Sid and became part of that scene, the punk scene, when it was, burgeoning. And that's, how she became famous or infamous, is through her association with Sid. So it's interesting to look at the fame angle and just see like what this all means. Just looking at her sun sign, she was a Pisces, and she had the moon in Gemini, Mercury in Pisces, Venus in Aquarius. And by the way, Venus in Aquarius can indicate the type of or the style of love that suits you. So, for instance, I have Venus in Aquarius too, and there tends to be this kind of almost like casual attitude towards love, where it's not this, grand thing. You might not want to get married. You might want, there's always that lurking aspect connected to freedom, but I also think that it has to do with being unconventional, not wanting to just be the cliched partner and things like that. But I just feel that people with Venus and Aquarius, they look at love in a kind of a quirky way, and it can also indicate the type of partner that you're attracted to. Supposedly more men towards women, but I think it can be either gender. Mars is supposed to be the one for women to, what is attractive to them, but I haven't found that true for myself. So that's what I would say, is that she probably was attracted to somebody like Sid because he was what we would call a misfit as well. And the term misfit is only fitting into that conventional society, not to put down anybody who is different. And her rising sign was Pisces. So she had Mars in Capricorn, her rising sign was Pisces. So her sun and her rising sign and her Mercury were all in Pisces. Pisces is, I would argue, the most sensitive sign. So if somebody has prominent Pisces, the world is can be this harsh place. And even if that person is not as deeply troubled as Nancy was her whole life, they still may have certain aspects to themselves that make it hard for them to function when it comes to the 3D reality. They may have strong urges towards escapism, to kind of, and by the way, Nancy had a drug problem, not surprising with all this Pisces. And speaking of which, her sun, her Mercury, and Chiron were all in the 12th house. So her sun and Mercury are already in Pisces, and then on top of that, they're in the 12th house. So I would almost see that as memories of a past life, really taking root as the person's identity in this lifetime. The 12th house is the house of karma, and it's considered the house of unconscious memories. I've heard subconscious memories attributed to the 12th house as well, 8th house for sure. I would leave that at the 8th house, and the 12th house be unconscious memories because of that past life karmic connection. So, again, if you have the sun in the 12th house, it doesn't mean that you're going to be troubled in life at all. It doesn't mean that. You may notice that your life does not feel totally, like free will. You might feel like you have all these soul contracts or something. I don't know. But I still don't think that it means that you have to suffer. 12th house can be the house of suffering, the house of undoing. But it doesn't have to be that way for 100% of the people. There are many different things that the 12th house represents. It represents seclusion and, like meditation, contemplation. So some people may just have an urge to live like a monk. Maybe they actually join some kind of ashram. I would say if it is that kind of a thing, it would tend more towards the places with that promise a lot of solitude. I and I may be wrong about that. It might be just any kind of, and it probably is any kind of an ashram situation. I've gone to the Hare Krishna temple in Chicago, and they have people who actually live at the temple. But there's so many people around that it doesn't feel like this secluded environment. And same, I've visited a Buddhist temple or whatever, but I don't know if that was a living quarters. But when you go to some of these places, even if they have people living there, it can feel like a communal environment and that there's a lot of social interaction. So this is more like either you could call it solitude or maybe isolation. So with her son here, it almost seems to me, based on her life, like solitary confinement, even when she was around other people, because she was experiencing things that maybe she felt trapped inside her own body, inside her own mind with Mercury here, and that other people just couldn't get it. As I recall, she had a sister, and I can't remember I think she might have had some kind of issues with her sister. Maybe she was jealous of her sister because her sister was quote unquote normal. I hesitate to talk about these things without really knowing it, but I seem to recall something like that. And so it's tempting to say, oh my gosh, she's like, if you read the book, you would say that she was demonically possessed. And I honestly believe that she was. What happened when she was born was that there was the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck, and her mother, they might have said that she was deprived of oxygen. I don't know about her intellectual capacity. What's his name? Johnny Rotten, another member of the Sex Pistols, stated that Sid Vicious was not very bright. So whether or not they were both kind of cognitively challenged in some way, I'm not sure. But that in and of itself isn't really that's not really that important, I would say. It's the aspect of being either violent or destructive in some way that is the most important aspect to this. And that does not go along with people who do not have who are learning, not learning disabled, but who are cognitively disabled, meaning, it is obviously a form of learning disability, but, not dyslexia or something mild, but something more profound where they don't understand things. I'm not that sure that was true for her, because I think she went to regular schools and was in regular classrooms. She did go to like a special school, but it was more for her behavior, I think, than anything else. Although having worked in special education in the past as a teacher's assistant, I can say that, and studied it, I can say that in some cases, there are children placed into special education because of their behavioral issues, because it does impact them. So, I think that if somebody is not doesn't have the intellectual capacity of the average person, they may misunderstand certain nuances in life that can anger them, confuse them, and if they have kind of that tendency to act out or anything along those lines, that can create problems for themselves and others. So, I don't know if that oxygen deprivation can truly be the culprit, because I'll explain in a minute why I think it was a demonic possession, but I just wanted to finish up with the 12th house. She has Chiron here, and when I do personal readings, I do see a certain number of people who have Chiron in the 12th house. And in what I have personally read about this placement is that the person can feel like they're guilty for everything. And it's like they're always, because the 12th house being the house of karma, and Chiron almost being Piscean itself. So there's that element of suffering connected to Pisces, to Chiron. There could be this karmic connection. And I personally believe that there may be some atonement that the person is doing when they have Chiron in this house. But the thing that I have pointed out to clients is that, this is a new lifetime. And you don't have to, you can let yourself off the hook, because you can't do anything about the past. You can only move forward and forgive yourself. Of course, if this is connected to unconscious memories, you may not know what those things were. And so you may, how can you forgive yourself for something you don't know what you did? But I think it's just like in this lifetime. It really is no different, where you realize that you're an eternal being, and that there's always this now moment, that you don't have to live in the past, and you don't have to be tortured by the past, and you can forgive yourself for anything. Just like the Lord's Prayer, forgive me my trespasses. So I think that is very telling. And it's interesting, too, that it's in Aquarius, because the sign of Aquarius connects with the people who are different, the weirdos, the nonconformists in society. And the 12th house is the house of Pisces, which is connected to intuitive matters, sensitivity, that kind of thing. And such a person who has this combination may feel like they're suffering, they're doing atonement, being different than others. She was born in Philly, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And that, I think, is probably like a pretty blue-collar area altogether, where that those conformist tendencies are more prevalent. If you live somewhere like New York City, or maybe San Francisco, some places where there's a lot of, creativity, where that's celebrated, the differences, that might be more compatible with being raised in those kinds of environments. But it's just very interesting, because she was born February 27th, 1958. And this is the end of the 50s, which was a decade where conformity was highly encouraged. If you've ever watched those creepy but hilarious educational films that were really more like brainwashing, it seems like to me, on how to behave, what an ideal life is supposed to be like. She was raised at the tail end of that. And actually, that was a time when there was beginning to be rebellion in the form of beatniks, the precursors to the hippies, but they were more They had that, like the Jack Kerouacs and all that kind of thing. So anyway, I wanted to also point out that, the one thing I wanted to say is with that conjunction in the 12th of the Sun and Mercury, that she may have, like I said, been tortured by those past life memories in a very unconscious way. And so in the 8th house, now this is another water house being ruled by a water sign, just like the 12th is Pisces, the 8th is Scorpio. Nancy had 3 placements here. She had Neptune, the North Node, which is very interesting, and Jupiter. Now, one of the things about the 8th house is it's that it's the house of death. And now, remember what I just said, she had these placements in Scorpio. Scorpio is the ruler of the 8th, so it's kind of like a double influence, you could say. And the North Node, to have that in Scorpio in the 8th house, and the 8th house being the house of death, you could say that her life path or her soul's mission was to I don't know how else to say this, to die. And I want to make this very, very clear. I'm not saying that everybody with the North Node in the 8th house is meant to have death define them. But we have to admit that her death, and by the way, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, she was murdered. So that's an important aspect of this, is that she was murdered. But the reason that her death is important is because it highlighted a lot of the things that she went through leading up to that point. If somebody is murdered, and or in her case, she could have easily died of a drug overdose. And in a case like that, I do believe that these people's deaths are very important tools for others. And a lot of times people will say, because let's see, how old was she when she died? It seems to me that, was she older than Sid? Because I think he was only 22 when he died. Oh, yeah, right. They were both, yeah, because it was the late 70s. And she died, I think it was this, I'm recording this in February, and I think it was in February of 1979. I don't know the exact year, but it was in the late 70s that she died. And they were like babies. They were like, 21, 22. That's tragic because they were like just, getting into their adulthoods. So it can be a cautionary tale. It can be something to dissect, to see like how to do things differently. So it serves a purpose, and that's what I don't like, is when people think that if somebody dies, I'm talking about specifically of a drug overdose, she was murdered. But if somebody dies of a drug overdose, almost like that the life was wasted. Nothing is ever wasted as far as I'm concerned. And I do believe that some people may even agree to a certain, maybe all of us agree to our death being a certain way. I don't know. But that might have been her path. But, it's interesting, too, because the 8th house is a shadow. So if she started screaming when she was a baby, she could have been this symbol of the collective shadow, if you look at it that way. And that life is not all perfect. and, sweetness and light. And it also, like the taboos in this world about, what is acceptable behavior and things like that. They kind of defied that. And I forgot, they called her some name. I saw it on Wikipedia, like that she was so gross, like she was doing these gross things in public. I don't know exactly what they were. But that, again, that is a shadow. The taboos, the unsavory in life. And the punk movement itself, which, came as a reaction to all of that beautiful music, the Beatles, the music that was so uplifting to us. And then we have this punk movement. Like, what is that about? Well, there was a lot of, in England, there was a lot of dissatisfaction with young people with the economy, and they didn't feel that they had a future. So that's, I think, how it all sprang up. But a lot of times people, society wants to kind of shove these individuals under the rug, and they were like not going to have it. So she also has Jupiter here, and Jupiter can be like a blessing. I mean, like, this is how you're lucky and things like that. And by the way, the 8th house and Scorpio are macabre. So the punk, aesthetic certainly was more on the side of the macabre. Black lipstick, all that clothing and the safety pins and all that stuff that Sid Vicious had. I'm not looking, I mean, not Sid Vicious, yeah, Sid Vicious, but I'm looking at Nancy right now. But just the kind of dark, gothic sensibilities, that's the 8th house. And Jupiter, to me, can also be that maybe death was a blessing to her because she suffered so much in life. She probably was very tormented in life. And Neptune here, to me, I see Neptune as that antenna. And people with Neptune in the 8th house may be subject to me, demonic possession, because Neptune has no boundaries. It is highly psychic, empathic. And in the 8th house, it can be the house of disincarnate entities. Entities that, we're talking about the souls, or I don't know if energy fragments is ever the case, of people who have crossed over who are not at peace, who are, they may be still trying to look for a host. They don't feel like they don't feel settled in themselves. But I think that it might even be entities like archonic, of the archonic variety. In other words, the feeders of the souls, that are not human, that were never really human, that are hybrids. We could say reptilians, but they're dark reptilians. Who knows? But whatever it is, this can be like an open channel that allows anything to come in. And this is also, Neptune relates to drugs. So I have seen, I am sure from my recollection of reading so much about Neptune, the 8th house, that you should not drink or do any kind of drugs if you have Neptune in the 8th house, because you can open yourself up to entities coming in. And it's parasitical, okay? It's it's demonic because it is of the dark forces. It's not, dark means just ignorant. That's what it ultimately means. But people who are ignorant do very negative things. And it's so I'm thinking that something like that might have happened. Now, Jim Morrison and his girlfriend Pamela Corson both had Neptune the eighth house. Now, there are different things that Neptune the eighth can mean. It can mean that you're just highly psychic in general. It can mean also that the cause of death is a mystery. Neptune can indicate confusion or even deception. And certainly with Jim Morrison, that is the case. His girlfriend, maybe it's a little bit more known about, but still she did take a lot of drugs before she died. So that still connects to Neptune. I don't know if there's ever been any conspiracies about an alternative cause of death with her, but you never know with these cases what the truth is. They could, be silencing people, especially since she was there when he died or was, living with him at the time. So you never quite know about that. But in any case, one of the things because I've done Jim's chart. So if you're interested in these rock figures or the people who hang around them, definitely look that up on my channel. But one of the things that I think I mentioned is that when I was a teenage girl in the early 80s, I read that book, No One Here Gets Out Alive, about Jim. And I just loved their music. And I love Jim. And being a fellow Sagittarian, I just love Jim. And yet, in recent years, I have watched Jim's performances, and I have been unnerved by his demeanor a lot of times. And I do wonder if he was under possession himself. Some people say that he was MK Ultra, which is a torture-based mind control. And he does have a military background via his father. So anything is possible. But in general, I just felt kind of creeped out by it. And I have kind of a little bit of a different take on him now than I did when I was younger. Still love him in the music. It's very scorpionic music too. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. Now, also about cause of death, the fourth house is Cancer's domain, and that I have read attributed to cause of death if you have certain planets here. So sometimes it's a little bit frustrating when, one thing seems to contradict the other. But all I can say is that is what I have read. I have read stuff about the eighth house being connected to the cause of death. So if you have Neptune in the eighth house, be careful about, be very intentional. If you do have medium mystic tendencies, if you know that you're easily hypnotizable, and you have even done automatic writing and channeling and stuff like that, be sure that you are protected, that you're not going into this blindly. And, the Ouija boards, things like that open people up to these kinds of lower entities might be really a bad thing to do, to say the least. Also, the eighth house can be magic, but this might be black magic. I mean, black magic can naturally be an outgrowth of magic itself. When people are controlling and they have a very strong desiring nature. They may do anything it takes to get what they want. And so being very ethical and higher minded is so important when you have Neptune in this house. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that she had, in the 10th house, she had Saturn. Saturn is a ruler of the 10th house. And it's kind of ironic because when I do personal readings and I see Saturn in the 10th house, I'm almost assured that the person is successful in terms of their career. And if they're on the younger side and haven't really gotten established, that they will someday, that they really have the attitude that they need to put in a lot of hard work to become successful, and they're not going to cut corners to get there, that they are truly willing to do whatever it takes. And the 10th house is the house of public reputation, and Saturn can put the damper on that. It can restrict maybe the person's image in a good way, that it comes across in a way that prevents them from doing things in life that they want to do. So if somebody has Saturn in the 10th house and other people, there's like a lack of popularity, that kind of thing, that can be quite damaging to the self-esteem. And of course, in Nancy's case, it wasn't necessarily something she could help. It was something that just happened. And yet, Saturn is about the long haul, and so this can mean fame. You know, that the person's name doesn't just vanish, go away. It can be, you know, the longevity factor. And one thing I forgot to mention is that Sid Vicious was charged with her murder, and yet I don't know if it was a documentary or the movie Sid and Nancy. There was a feature film called Sid and Nancy. I don't know if they had that possibility in that movie or if it was something else I saw, that it was somebody else in their social circle that did it. I don't know if it was a drug dealer or someone like that. And she does, in the 11th house of Friends, she has Venus, and she also has Mars. Now, Mars can indicate violence. So, to me, that could indicate somebody who is, where violence is committed on them from somebody that is in their social network. But Venus is interesting that she has it here because it really does speak to this idea of, kind of getting by with a little help from your friends. She moved to England, she got involved with that scene, the punk scene, and then, how they did when they didn't have any money, they crashed at somebody's house and all of that, and helped each other out, maybe. So, I'm going to leave it there, but boy, it's really a sad situation. But, there's always value in every life and every death. It matters. It helps the collective. And may she rest in peace. Take care. Bye.